There's one sentence that ends any serious conversation about visitors before it even starts. You can stack everything on the table: declassified documents, radar witnesses, the video the Pentagon itself admitted was real. Doesn't matter.
The calmest skeptic in the room just has to say that one sentence, and everybody nods along with him. Space is too big. The distances are impossible. No ship could cross thousands of light years to get here. And I'll be honest with you, for a long time I thought he was right. I went into this investigation to confirm exactly that, to prove with the physics in hand that nobody could have come from that far away. I came out with the opposite certainty. Not because the distances got smaller, but because I found out the question was wrong from the very first second. They don't cross the distance. According to the source I'm about to show you, they never crossed it at all. My name is Stanley, and this is code 1947. Today you're going to understand why the distance argument, the strongest, the most respectable weapon skepticism has, falls apart completely the moment you understand one single thing about what location actually is. I'm going to show you the exact mechanism a physical extraterrestrial described to explain how his ships move. And before this file closes, you're going to look at the word here and realize it never meant what you thought it meant. Here isn't a place, it's a frequency. If you're the kind of person who doesn't swallow an easy answer, who needs to watch the whole line of reasoning close before you change your mind, then this file was opened for exactly you. Every piece I lay down now snaps into a single image, and you're going to watch it form in real time. First, let's give the skeptic everything he wants. Let's take the distance argument seriously, with real numbers. The closest star to the Sun, Proxima Centauri, is 4.2 light-years away. Sounds like nothing when you write it like that. But Voyager 1, the fastest object humanity has ever launched out of the solar system, travels at around 17 kilometers per second. At that speed, to reach that neighboring star, the closest one of all, Voyager would take more than 70,000 years. 70,000 years to reach the yard next door, and the whole galaxy is 100,000 light-years across. The skeptic isn't being stubborn. Within the rules he knows, he is absolutely correct. Traveling those distances is impossible, and physicists took this so seriously that they tried to beat the problem head-on. In 1994, a physicist named Miguel Alcubierre proposed an elegant mathematical solution. If you can't move fast through space, then bend space itself. Contract the space in front of the ship, expand it behind, and let the ship surf inside a bubble sitting still while the universe slides around it. On paper, it works. The problem is the price. To sustain that bubble, you'd need something called negative energy, in amounts that, on the first calculations, meant converting the entire mass of a planet like Jupiter into pure exotic energy, a solution that exists in the math and is impossible in practice. Hold on to that detail, because it comes back harder than it looks. And so they tried another route, wormholes. A shortcut that stitches two distant points of space together by folding the fabric of the universe itself, like punching through both ends of a folded sheet of paper and pushing a pencil through the middle. Elegant. Except every time physics tries to open one of these tunnels, it collapses before anything can get through. Too unstable to exist long enough. Another dead end. And here's where I want you to watch the pattern, not each individual attempt. The warp bubble, the wormhole, the curvature drive, every human solution to distance starts from the same hidden assumption that, one way or another, you have to go from a point A to a point B, that there's an in-between to be conquered. What if all our difficulty was never in the distance, but in that one assumption nobody realized they were making? Now look at what the objects observed in the sky actually do. November 2004, off the coast of California.
Fighter jets from the carrier group of the USS Nimitz intercept an object the pilots nicknamed the Tic-Tac, after its shape.
Gun camera, military radar, multiple trained witnesses. The object drops from about 20 kilometers of altitude down to nearly sea level in less than a second. No sonic boom, no exhaust trail, no visible control surface at all, no wings, no rudder, no propulsion. It doesn't fly like something that pushes air backward to move itself forward. It behaves like something that simply decides to be in a different place. One of the pilots, a seasoned Navy commander, described afterward that the movement didn't have the jitter of an aircraft. It was smooth, impossibly smooth. And that's the detail that repeats in report after report, decade after decade. A man who spent his whole life documenting this phenomenon described the very first object he ever saw, still young, like this: a perfect black triangle, one blue-white light on each of the 3 points, a dull orange light in the center underneath, hovering about 20 feet above a hotel, the size of a house. And then he said the sentence that stuck in my head through this entire investigation. He said the object moved like it was being pulled on a sheet of glass. It didn't bobble like an airplane does. It was just sliding across the sky, in total silence. Sit with that choice of words. That's not the description of something that crossed the sky with effort. It's the description of something that was being repositioned in it. And if you think this is only a thing of old military cameras, remember the drones that showed up in a swarm over New Jersey, objects the authorities spent weeks unable to explain publicly, while the whole country looked up. Part of them, according to the same source I'm about to bring in, was a real military operation, searching for missing nuclear material. But part of them wasn't human. And if you ever felt, watching that news, that specific itch that they were only telling you half the story, hold on to that instinct. It's sharper than you think, and in a minute you're going to understand exactly what it was picking up on. People who dig deep don't leave here without putting that on the record in the comments, because it's people like you who pull the connections everyone else walks right past. Everything we've seen so far has an easy exit for the skeptic: miscalibrated instrument, secret military tech,
Optical illusion, coincidence. And if the investigation stopped here, he'd win again, like he always wins. But it doesn't stop here.
because in a session recorded in 2026, a man named Darryl Anka, who for more than 40 years has claimed to channel an extraterrestrial intelligence that introduces itself by the name Bashar, described the exact mechanism behind that silent slide. And once you hear the description, every object that glides across the invisible sheet of glass stops being a mystery and becomes a demonstration. Before you close the tab, let me get the mystical out of the way, because this matters for the investigation to stay honest. The state this kind of transmission happens in isn't supernatural. In the brain, it corresponds to the gamma state, between 40 and 100 cycles per second, the same state anyone enters when they're so absorbed in what they love they lose track of time. Everyone's been there. And according to Anka, what comes through him isn't a spirit, isn't a ghost. It is, in his words, a physical extraterrestrial, one who insists on giving practical tools instead of mysticism, always explaining the why and the how of each thing. Hold on to that word, physical, a real civilization with real ships. And it was about those ships that he said the following. He said, and I'm going to give you the quote as close to the exact words as I can, "An object doesn't exist in a location exists in an object." They have figured out a way to isolate that locational variable that defines this object in space and time and change its locational variable to this frequency, which means this stops existing here and instantly starts existing there without actually traveling in between. Read it again with me slowly, because this is the key that opens the entire video. An object doesn't exist in a location. The location exists inside the object. Let me translate that into something you can hold in your hand. Take a ball sitting on a table. It has color, it has weight, it has shape, it has temperature. Now take that same ball and put it on the other side of the table. What changed? Not the weight, not the color, not the shape. One thing changed: the location. We treat location as if it's the setting the object sits in, the stage separate from the actor. Bashar is saying that's a mistake in perception. Location is a property of the object, as much a part of it as its color or its mass. It's just one more variable inside the vibrational signature of that thing. And if location is a variable of the object, and not a fixed address out there in space, then you don't need to carry the object through space to a new address. You just need to change the value of that variable. You rewrite the where, and the object simply starts being there. Why would that work? What lets you rewrite a ship's position like someone changing a number on a form?
Here, the same source snaps the second piece into place, and it's dizzying. According to Bashar, physical reality isn't continuous.
It blinks. The frame rate, how you shift through reality billions of times per second, shifting from one parallel reality to another to create what you experience your timeline to be, is 10 to the 43rd power. It's what your scientists refer to as the Planck scale. In other words, what you feel as a solid, uninterrupted world is actually a sequence of frozen frames, rendered and re-rendered an absurd number of times per second, like the frames of an old film reel. Each frame, on its own, is still. The sensation of movement comes only from switching between frames, and if reality remakes itself from scratch 10 to the 43rd times per second, then between one frame and the next, there's an opening. A civilization that learned to control which frame an object gets redrawn in doesn't need to move it through space. It just needs to draw it at a different coordinate in the next frame. The ship doesn't travel from there to here. It stops being rendered there and starts being rendered here. And look how this even explains the shape of the ships. The same source claims the ships of that civilization aren't built like ours, riveted metal plating, engineered to withstand the brutal force of acceleration and re-entry. They're grown. They create an energy template in the shape of the ship, and on that template a crystalline, quasi-metallic material grows, like growing a crystal from a seed. Think about what that implies. You only build a reinforced hull to survive a journey if there's a journey to survive. A ship that never accelerates, never suffers friction, never crosses any distance at all, because it's only redrawn at different coordinates, doesn't need to be a war tank. It needs to be a crystal tuned to an exact frequency. And when they asked this intelligence where his ship was at that exact moment, the answer didn't come in light years.
It came in miles, 1,500 miles above a rock formation called Bell Rock in the Arizona desert, about 3,000 kilometers.
Not across the galaxy, right up there while the conversation was happening. And this is where the investigation stops being about ships and starts being about you. Because if location is just a variable, if where a thing is only a value that can be rewritten and not a sentence carved in stone, then I have to ask you an uncomfortable question. What else in your life have you been treating as a fixed address when it's actually just a variable waiting to be changed? Don't file that question away. Face it right now, because it's the real payoff of this file, and I'm paying it off now. Let's close what I promised back at the start. The distance argument, the strongest one skepticism has, depends entirely on a single assumption, that to be here something had to travel here. Take that assumption away, and the argument evaporates in your hand. The 70,000 years to Proxima Centauri, the mass of Jupiter converted into negative energy to bend space, the wormhole that collapses before anything gets through, all of that was heroic attempts to solve the wrong problem. Nobody needs to survive the distance if nobody crosses any distance. The silence of the Tic-Tac, the 20-kilometer drop in under a second with no boom, the triangle sliding across the invisible glass, none of that is a ship fighting the physics of travel. It's a ship that isn't traveling. It's being repositioned, frame by frame, inside a reality that remakes itself 10 to the 43rd times per second. And if you think this means they're still going to arrive someday in the distant future, you flipped the arrow of time. The same source states, without hedging, that Earth is already, secretly, part of a galactic federation, that what we call open contact isn't an arrival, it's a reveal, permission for you to finally see what's already been here for decades, working side by side with scientists and governments, in silence. It reminds us that indigenous cultures all over the planet never lost that contact. That for them there was never a "they're going to arrive," only a "they were always here." What's changing isn't the distance between us and them, it's the bandwidth of our own perception. We're just now catching up to the last piece of a puzzle a good part of humanity never stopped seeing. And that's exactly why this story is about you, and not about a ship parked in the Arizona sky. Because the law is the same on both sides. If here for a starship is just a frequency it selects, then here for your life, the circumstances you wake up in every day, the version of reality you're inhabiting right now, is also a variable you've been treating as a fixed, permanent coordinate. You're not stuck in the place you're in, you're tuned to it. And the same source is insistent about how you change the tuning, and there's absolutely nothing passive about it. What you feel as genuine excitement, that specific, inexplicable thrill about something, according to Bashar, that's your own soul telling you what your true frequency is, what the next frame on your timeline is.
And the language that actually changes the variable isn't words, isn't wishing, isn't positive thinking, it's action.
It's acting on the thing that lights you up inside, because action is what proves which reality you're actually choosing to jump to. Not as dogma, not as self-help mysticism, but as the very same mechanism that repositions the ship, just scaled down to the size of a human life. You rewrite your own location variable by acting inside it. So I hand you back the question I opened with, now turned inside out. The skeptics said they're too far away to be here. But what if distance was never the obstacle, not for them, and not for you? Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen something in the sky that didn't behave like something that traveled there? That smooth, silent, impossibly calm movement. I read every account, and it's from these first-hand descriptions that the next investigation is born. And if this way of decoding the phenomenon makes sense to you, if you want to keep reading these signals with me, file by file, this is the channel where they get opened one at a time. Just step inside with the ones who are already on the other side of the file, because the next piece is even more disturbing than this one. The same source described an exact boundary, 333,000 cycles per second, the precise point where the physical stops being physical and becomes something else. And what crosses that boundary changes everything about what's coming in 2027. But that's the next file. The signal is real, and the code is here.